Welcome to the Tesla Power Podcast, the Tesla energy community covering solar panels, solar roof, and Powerwall for your home. I'm Aaron Brady. Today, let's talk about Tesla underlayment, Tesla install struggles, how many Powerwalls you should get, PTO and utility incentives, and let's talk about production comparisons between solar panels and solar roof. Let's do it. So we'll kick it off the podcast with community input. You can participate by leaving a comment below, linking your own YouTube videos, calling 203-816-5150, or emailing teslapowerpodcast@gmail.com. Something you can do pretty easily is record an unlisted video question in the YouTube app and send a link so I can put your video question in the show. Now, first up, we're going to bring up one of the emails that I got this week to teslapowerpodcast@gmail.com. This is from Jeffrey Moulton, who's responding to Brian at Northampton Arts Council's question about the integrity of the underlayment on its own while waiting on the solar install. Quote, in your November 4th, episode 30 podcast, you had a person ask about how good is the underlayment for the Tesla solar roof. Our install was this past September, and in the middle of the install, we had two severe rain events. One was the remains of a hurricane, and the other the remains of a tropical storm. We had 8 days of rain with a total of over 3.8 inches of rain. The underlayment provided the protection for our house and held up extremely well. I have confidence that our roof is sealed by the underlayment, and the underlayment is protected by the solar roof mounted above it. I hope that my experience and my information is helpful to those concerned about the Tesla underlayment. Great podcast. Keep up the great work of providing needed information. End quote. And Jeffrey, thank you for your email and for the photos. Let's pull up those photos. Check them out. I've got them right here. And this is the underlayment as it's going on. I mean, the guys that are putting this on are basically rock climbers. They're just rappelling down the side of the roof here. This is the underlayment fully on, and you can see the racks being put up for holding the solar tiles while they begin the solar tile install. This is everything completely done, including the mount points for the rest of the rope crew and the rest of the racks for holding the solar roof. And then this is as they're installing. I mean, basically it's rappelling down the side of the roof. Definitely harrowing if it's not something you've done before. And you'll notice that some roofing teams don't use these kinds of securements, and that, I mean, it just seems like a terrible idea. Here's the roof getting very close to being done, and the roof done. And this house looks so good with that solar roof. It's a little bit, old world and a little bit modern. Really, really great. And thank you very much for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Next up, we have Randy Hawkins. He's back. He's wrapping up his project. It's been difficult with lots of unexpected delays. He writes, quote, Aaron, this is funny. As it happens, it's likely that the entire project will be done on November 5th or within a few more days rather than just starting that day. The schedule bot is way off, end quote. And it's definitely humorous. I mean, Tesla's estimates, I'm sure, are automated in some way, but they can be really far off. And that's why, we're doing the podcast. What we want to do is we want to share our experiences and give other people, a better view of what's coming, a better idea of what's going to happen, because what they put out on the timeline, it's definitely not what happens in every case. I mean, that would definitely be the best case. But Randy and I, we had a great conversation on the phone this weekend. And he wanted to make sure that we pointed out three things. Number one, Tesla is definitely bad about communication, especially when trying to get detail from the account manager, who's in generally a remote location. For him, his account manager is in Utah, and he happens to be in San Diego. But number two, he wanted to point out that Tesla has worked really hard to make things right, and that they've increased the value of the system to help make up for the difficulties. Thirdly, the local Tesla people are incredible. They're knowledgeable, and they really, really care. And personally, I can say the same thing. I have the same takeaways from my experience. So, Randy, I'm really happy for you that you're able to get through the project with an overall good feeling, even though there have been some struggles, right? And I'm happy for you and for your neighbors, for that matter. You'll love the roof and the beauty that it brings to your neighborhood. Let's bring up the next question. This one's from Kevin Giasulo. He writes that he's received an update on his current project. Quote, I have officially been quoted a 21.5 kilowatt solar roof with a recommended 2 Powerwalls, but I may up that to 3 or 4, end quote. Kevin sent a screenshot of his layout. You can see just a little bit of it there, but let me bring it full screen so we can see it a little bit better. You can see here that they basically cover his whole roof with solar tiles, and I am so jealous. Even though not all of them will produce at max capacity all year, he will be crushing the solar production during the summer when the sun's directly overhead. Now, Kevin, let's talk about those batteries. In my opinion, the more storage, the better. The one thing that I notice about my system is that I'm working the batteries really hard. So I'm pulling that max 10 kilowatts from those batteries when the car is charging. That's 5 per Powerwall. I've got 2 of them. But even on days when we don't charge the car, we can run out of battery due to, lack of sun that day or even the day before. And straight up, it is getting worse in the winter, as you would expect, right? And I'm really glad overall that we went for the second battery. Even though that's holding up permission to operate. I would say that if we had PTO and we could take advantage of net metering, that would be awesome. But if we just look at raw storage, like say batteries were free, I would be getting as many of them as possible. Now, you might have seen in some of my podcasts, some of my past episodes, that actually this is the cover story on episode 7. There are locales where Powerwalls are essentially free. And that's because the incentive covers the marginal cost above the first Powerwall. Now, for those that have this incentive, do not hesitate. Do it. It is a gift that will keep on giving. All right, next question. Frosty GT and I have been commiserating in the comments. Frosty GT says, quote, still waiting for my PTO installed June 26th, 2021, end quote. Now, I've been waiting since April with no hope in sight, so I'm, more than 6 months. I needed a reminder. I know Frosty had told me this before, but I needed to know why he was still waiting. So let's bring that back up. He says, quote, now National Grid says, with my solar and my neighbor's solar, that the transformer needs upgrading, end quote. And you know what? That sounds expensive. I mean, if I'm going to be honest here, I would say this is probably the lowest possible priority for the utility. I mean, think about it. Like, how much money can they ever dream of making from the solar capacity that you'll be feeding back to them on the grid? I would expect they won't be able to make very much. Maybe more over time. It's just hard to know. But the bigger question is, do they have the battery capacity to store your production for use when customers actually need it? And I expect they do not. So how can they make your solar capacity a priority? I just don't see it. This might be, honestly, the worst story I've heard so far. It's not due to you. It's not due to Tesla. It is 100% in the hands of the utility. And they're not on your side, unfortunately. Jack Rickard, may he rest in peace, had one hell of a time with his local utility when getting solar installed and approved. He went on a week-long rant on how the utility's incentives are opposed to adopting green energy. And what I wanted to do for you guys, I wanted to share a couple of clips from a particular rant just for some wider context. So let's play it.
Society has become very dependent on electrical power. Civilization starts to break down in day 3 when we don't have it. And so the war with the utility company that I spoke of several years ago is already well underway, and it's pretty serious. If they can shut off the power, because it might cause a forest fire, well, you wouldn't want a transformer explosion either. So maybe they'll shut off the power and you see where this goes. It's a nonsense conversation. There is an actual problem that has to do with the nature of the Earth to rotate about its axis and sunlight to be periodic. I'm going to put a graph up here, and it shows at the top the demand cycle on a daily basis for electricity demand in California. Demand reaches a nadir, or its lowest point, at 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And once you all get up and start making toast and coffee, it starts to rise. It rises through the day, but really peaks about, I'd say 6 p.m., 5 to 7 p.m. And that's the natural demand curve. The bottom curve, the orange one, is solar power production in California. And that starts 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning and goes to, it starts to diminish after 4 o'clock, and then we're pretty much done at 6 p.m., which is the peak of your use of electricity. And so if you offset the demand curve by the solar production curve, you get the green curve. Someone labeled this the duck curve. I wish I knew who it was. It doesn't look much like a duck to me, but it's the combination of the two curves. And so you see it starts up a little bit at 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning, but as the sun comes up, it goes down dramatically because of the addition of the solar. But starting at 5 o'clock, we have a rise in demand combined with a decline in solar. And so what we talk about there is a ramp rate. And it's kind of a huge one, where the output of the grid has to rise 10 or 12 or 15 megawatts in California, 1,000 megawatts in California, within a 2-hour period. Nuclear power plants and coal-fired power plants are not like cars. They don't have an accelerator to cause them to increase power. You have to increase the heat, and that has to be done fairly carefully. And to get them to quit producing power, you have to take it off fairly carefully. And it takes time to do that. So they usually operate those at a fairly level rate and fill in the differences with peaker plants that are usually turbines run by natural gas, and much smaller plants, but they can modulate the power output much better. They have to produce exactly what we consume. Then you can't really have any slop in the system. And so this is their challenge. They're actually pretty good about regulating it. This residential solar wants to treat the grid as a battery. And I've said several times, it doesn't make a very good battery at all, because it has to produce exactly what you consume. And they have to maintain a capacity about 10% over what you might consume in a worst case day, 100-degree temperature or whatever, to be able to provide that. And so this duck curve is a bit of a genuine problem. And it does need a solution, and storage is probably the solution to time shift this peak availability of power to coincide with the peak demand.
Now, he is referencing PG&E and their wildfires and what PG&E has been doing to compensate for those things, and that's how he's setting this whole thing up. Don't forget that these videos were recorded a couple of years ago, but I think they're full of tons of great information. It's really helpful to curate them out. Now, he's setting up the core issue that solar produces energy when it's not needed, and this demand needs to shift. So let's take a listen to what Jack predicted would happen back in 2017 and is now happening to Frosty GT.
January. And so I advocate keeping a connection to the grid, paying the $11.24 a month, using them like the hose they are when you want to, and really having an isolated connection to one device. The charger is the only thing that it ever actually connects to. You don't use very much electricity. Well, that's very hard for a utility company to detect. You see a lot of empty houses around with for sale signs on the front of them. And there's a lot of apartments that aren't rented and nobody's in those using any electric either. So they can't go into a panic if you just don't use very much electricity. In fact, they can't detect that. You're invisible. But you still have the connection if you need it. Let's say there was a wildfire and you needed some electricity. Well, wait a minute. They're not going to be there for that either. The duck curve is somewhat more nefarious. I want you to picture a world where hundreds of thousands of people in California have each paid $40,000 to $70,000 to have a photovoltaic array on their roof, and the utility company can turn it down anytime they want instead of getting paid for that electricity. It simply isn't made while the panels bake in the sunshine. Now, not to be extreme, but you understand the utility company sells them electricity in some cases at 25, 35, 45 cents a kilowatt hour, and they buy it from them for 2 or 3 cents. They have the ability to simply shift the frequency to 61 and a little bit and turn them all off entirely. So how would you like to spend $40,000 on a photovoltaic array to put on your roof that doesn't save you anything? Well, they'd be delighted for that to be the case because it's the end of the problem. You'll quit putting photovoltaics on the roof. And so you've given control to Pacific Gas and Electric Company over the precise output of your rooftop photovoltaic array, and all of their motivators are for it to be off. And it's trivial for them to turn them off now. With implementation of phase 2, they can turn off your photovoltaic panel and you won't even know they're not producing unless you have something hooked up showing this. Okay, so you had yours put in before February of 2019. Lucky you. Except almost all of the grid-tied inverter manufacturers have you hooked up to a website where you can conveniently view your output of your photovoltaic array. And of course, they can conveniently update your firmware. And so you're going to find that you're phase 2 compliant automatically. But you may notice that your array isn't doing quite what it was because the utility company is turning it off. And their excuse is going to be the duck curve. And it's a fairly believable excuse. They really need storage. And there are several kinds that are out there. One, batteries are the obvious one.
Batteries are the obvious one. Now, Frosty GT has some batteries, but the problem is that the utility doesn't want competitors providing electricity for their customers. And from when this video was recorded with Jack Rickard, those incentives have not changed. The only reason they're moving forward with renewables is because they're the only way forward economically. They're so cheap now, you have to move to renewables. But the utilities, they want to be the ones that own the asset. And that is bad news for Frosty GT. They want to just keep that production from coming online in the first place. Now, Jack puts a very fine point on it. Let's listen to this last clip.
Storage. So that's kind of a backgrounder as to what's going on. My mission for the last couple of years has been to work on a solution for individuals to dance with elephants. How do you, in your garage or shop or home, deal with a world where electricity becomes much less reliable? Who knows when the threat of a possible wildfire might come to your area, and they shut off the electricity to keep from possibly starting a fire. But we've had a number of weather events, and just the grid is becoming less reliable. In 1985, the United States of America had 5 electrical outages of over an hour in a year. We're now having 350 outages in excess of an hour in a year nationwide. That's not a good trend line. So the reliability of your power supply is going down, and the price of it's going up, and now the threat of it's a basic precept. If you're selling somebody something, you don't want them to become a manufacturer of what you're selling them. They're selling you power, and now you're going to put panels on your roof and become a producer. Well, they don't like that whole concept. It's a threat to their business model. And now with the duck curve, they have a persuasive story about how they need to be in control of the power you output. This is, as I predicted 2 years ago on EVTV, and I told you, the Cumbaya moment you have to give up. We're not all going to hold hands and sing Cumbaya and make electricity into the future. I'm not really addressing the appropriateness of solar or wind as a long-term solution to our nation's energy supply. I'm talking about you as a homeowner or a shop or a small business. There was a guy who had a little marina that's in season out in California. They only have a short season where they're able to rent expensive boats and pump that gas into visiting boats and sell those potato chips and beer to boats and boat guys. And they shut him down last week. He's losing $25,000 a week and having to refund deposits on boats because the winds are such that it might start a wildfire if they keep providing him electricity.
I mean, it just gets more insidious is the problem. And the incentives are just not right. Utilities don't want you to have solar because they don't want to incentivize individuals to own the asset. Individuals are their competition. I mean, this is an especially bad deal for utilities that are forced through legislation to net meter for customers. Of course, that's the great deal for us. That's what we're all counting on, is to be able to realize that value for that asset that we're putting money into. Now, I'm not saying that utilities are as nefarious as Jack seems to think they are, but you can't deny that incentives aren't aligned. And that's probably bad news for Frosty GT. They're not going to want to spend all the money to change the transformer just so that he can be their competition. So, collectively, before we all move forward with our solar projects, I mean, we'll probably need to ask Tesla to check with the utility to make sure you can tie to the grid. I mean, what if your transformer needs to be upgraded, but you've already spent all this money and now you're dependent on the utility to upgrade the transformer that they're not even incentivized to upgrade? You're screwed. It's just not great. So, you're going to Tesla, though, to try to get the information. And then, of course, you run into another incentive problem. Tesla's incentivized to sell you solar, whether or not the utility can handle the production. I mean, it's just an impossible situation. But let's discuss. Let's see how we can get the info before moving forward, especially with like rural grid-tied solar projects where infrastructure may need to be upgraded. Thank you very much to Jeffrey Moulton, to Randy Hawkins, to Kevin Giasulo, and for Frosty GT, all for their input. We want to hear from everyone, though. The more input we get, the better for all of us, right? The more information we can pull together to make sure that we know what to expect for our project. So you can send your YouTube links, you can comment below, you can call 203-816-5150, or you can email teslapowerpodcast@gmail.com. Now let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into some news. All right, Solar Power World reports on the growing trend to install batteries in homes in the Northeast. And interestingly, utilities are cool with it. Maybe we get our Cumbaya moment after all. Let's read some of the article. Quote, the U.S. electric grid, let me scroll down to it, has long performed as a one-way street. Utilities supply power to customers, but never demand power from customers. That's why residential solar has always been an obstacle for utilities. They aren't asking for peak solar power generation at noon when they still have to fire up fossil fuel generators to meet peak demand at 6 p.m. Only the addition of batteries allows customer-sited solar to become a dispatchable resource utilities can work with. If they have access to it through groups of distributed behind-the-scene meter batteries known as VPPs, end quote. Now, of course, that stands for virtual power plant, and Jack Rickard would be skeptical, but maybe this really is the answer. Rather than simply being a liability that must be shut down, this can make home solar an asset on demand for utilities. They'll still need to pay for the infrastructure, and the scales will still be tilted heavily in favor of the utilities as far as the monetary benefits from the sale of solar generated electricity. But as our consumption triples over the coming decades, I think we can see some hope for providing the electricity requirement collaboratively between utilities and homeowners to meet that demand in the future. So we'll see, but at least there's some hope. All right, next up, we've got Clean Technica. They report on a new manufacturing facility opened by Tesla. They're not going to make cars. They're not going to make batteries. But they're going to make the machines that make the batteries that go in the cars. And, of course, the home energy storage products, which is what we care about here on the Tesla Power Podcast. Let's read the quote. Let me take it full screen. Quote, Tesla has opened a new factory to produce battery manufacturing equipment in Canada, Reuters reports. Frank Scarpitti, the mayor of Markham, Ontario, took to Twitter to share his excitement about Tesla's presence in his city. He tweeted an official statement and added his thoughts on the positive news, noting that Tesla has been up and running there since this summer, end quote. And that, I didn't even know about this. I'm not saying that I'm surprised or anything like that. They've had a research facility with Jeff Don in Canada for a long time. And, Canada is known for their manufacturing prowess and for their very highly skilled labor force. What I was also happy to see in this article was that there's a video that Tesla has released showing off the facility. It looks like a recruiting video, but let's check it out. It's interesting nonetheless.
My name is Hong Yang, and my role here is focusing on the cathode precursor development. We are exploring a bunch of different optimal conditions to make our production environmentally friendly and also very efficient. It's everything about the battery. So definitely from this end all the way to the customer end, there is a big impact.
My name is Sonia. I work for the charging infrastructure team for Tesla Canada, and we build the supercharger network across the country. Last year, we completed the Trans-Canada Highway supercharger line, going from Vancouver, BC, all the way across to Nova Scotia and soon to be PEI. We based it off of convenience and also getting a supercharger in every province. The growth I've seen in Tesla Canada from 4 years ago has been both a growth in the mission as well as the people. Our teams have grown and we've opened more delivery centers, which is a great center for sales, delivery, service, and also hosting superchargers.
My name is Tung, and I'm a mechanical designer at Tesla Toronto. The primary task of my job is factory layout design, basically the floor plans of all the equipment. The factory space is very precious, so we try to optimize the flow. We work closely with each equipment within the cell assembly line. Nobody here is afraid of challenges. I think one thing I learned here, there's always a way. Something seems impossible at the beginning, there's always a way to work it out. Just overcoming obstacles becoming like a routine.
My name is Zenia and I'm CNC lead machinist. My job is to take care of the people on the shop floor and making sure the production is running well. So right now we are making feeder screws. This is part of the battery line. I program the machine and make sure it's operating well. My experience has been great with Tesla. I really like to work here. Very excited to be part of the battery project because I think going to accelerate transition for a better life and for clean energy. It's a dream coming true.
So it's a recruitment video that covers a lot more functions than what we want to talk about here on the show. But what I really want to highlight is we forget how much Tesla's doing to take control of its destiny. By opening a plant to make the machines that make the batteries, we have some hope that supply can catch up to demands, I don't know, sometime this decade or two, you know? As I've been pointing out, it's the only hope we have for affordable batteries for home storage anytime soon. What I really want to see, though, is a factory that makes batteries. So we're going to take those machines that they make in Canada. We're going to open a factory maybe in the northeast of the USA that uses these machines to make batteries that'll go in cars and energy storage products. Then I want to see another one opened in the south and another opened in the Midwest. That'd give us 5 battery factories in the US of A that could be pumping out battery supply that can bring down the cost and the wait time of cars and energy storage products as we make our transition to renewable energy. Last story for today. This is from Tech Times. They cover the news that Tesla's now a licensed energy provider in the state of Texas. Let's read it. Quote, Elon Musk and Tesla are now clean energy and electricity providers in their home state and headquarters in Texas after getting approval and its license in bringing their venture for public use. Before this, Musk has awaited the decision of the state with regards to its distribution and installation of its Tesla solar Powerwall and other home energy services for people's use. End quote. Not the best writing ever, but it is great news for both Tesla and for Texas residents. Especially after the power failures last February, energy security is more important to Texans than ever. Not only is Tesla now able to sell energy to consumers, but it's long been selling energy independence to customers through its solar and battery storage products. So this news, I mean, it's not restricted just to those that have been fortunate enough to be able to afford Tesla energy products, but it's also for those who are not, because Tesla will be able to leverage the purchase of the affluent customers for the greater good of the state of Texas. You know, it's similar to what they were doing in California. You know, it was charity that they offered the state of California earlier this year when they started that virtual power plant project. The only difference is it's going to be a sustainable way in Texas anyway, not just to stabilize the grid, but to grow energy security and independence into the future. Now, it's really important that it be not just sustainable in the way that we use energy, but that it's able to feed itself and grow. Because if you have to use government incentives to keep this stuff going, it can only go so far. Once it becomes a very compelling economic eventuality, then it's going to happen and you don't have to worry about continuing to pump it full of money. Anyway, let's take another break. When we come back, I'll talk about what I'm doing to push Tesla to get me across the PTO finish line. All right, so what I want to do is I want to pull up my phone. So let me take a second just to get that set up, and then I'll insert it here. All right, so I have taken some action to move Tesla forward on my application with United Illuminating. I've reached out to one of the remaining project managers to try to, jumpstart this effort. So I've written, quote, "I'm having difficulty getting PTO, now more than 6 months, because the application to UI is inaccurate. Who can help me get this application corrected?" End quote. Now, you might remember that I had broken the news on episode 4 that Tesla Energy had removed all project managers from the organization. That meant that the person I had developed my relationship with during the on-site work portion of the project was no longer with the company. He was awesome. Even though he was no longer employed, he did refer me to the local contacts that I could still reach out to. But in famous Tesla fashion, I've not heard from either of them when reaching out. I did get results, so I can admit that I don't necessarily need to hear from anyone, but it would sure be nice to get confirmation that my request was received and that action was taken. And at the time of this recording, I haven't received confirmation that my request's been received or that any action has been taken. So unfortunately, what am I supposed to do? Like, wait forever? I don't know. How long should I wait before following up? What do you guys think? And what's been your experience in the past if you've gone through something like this? Also, I wanted to do a quick update actually on production. So let me pull up the phone insert again. I just got to resize it so we can see the content that I want to show you. Almost there. All right. Oh, and it's not following, of course. I really need a better phone mirroring program. So if you guys have a suggestion, please let me know, because that would surely make my life a lot better. So it's following my orientation, so it must still be running, but it's not updating the screen capture. And it did this stuff the whole time I was trying to show you guys how to post a video comment too. So it's just painful. If you're waiting on your technology, then your technology is not good enough. You got to figure something else out. All right, it looks like maybe it's caught up to me. All right, great. So let me go ahead and bring that full screen. What I wanted to do is show you some stuff that was in the Tesla app and in my brother-in-law's application, showing what his production is. And let me take it over to the house, and we can see under energy, solar production. Today we produced 23 kilowatts. And if we go through the last few days, we can see we're very reliably producing over 20 kilowatts. It's not enough to fill up our batteries at our current usage, but it's impressive when we compare it to my brother-in-law's system. So let's just go back a couple more days. It's 26, 22, and that's back to November 4th. So let's pull up his SolarEdge portal, which is on the web. And I give it its own dedicated tab in my browser. I just need this mirroring program to catch up to me. But you can see, once it catches up here, that his production has been below 25 kilowatts, and in fact below 20 kilowatts. Even though ours is staying well above that. Of course, my phone's still frozen. I should just show you on the freaking camera if I can. So that's what you should be seeing on the phone emulator. Of course, it's not working, and it's not going to stay in focus either because I've got it focused for back here. Just disappointing. Oh, there we go. It's finally catching up. But you can see the scale on the side is showing 25K down to 20K, but we're handily outproducing him. And this is going to be for several months now. I also took a screenshot of the solar production curves. I'm glad I didn't rely on this program to do it. If I pull that up here and get a look, I'll just take it full screen right away. But this is our solar production curve today. And you can see it's pretty good. There's a little bit of a notch in the middle. But here's their solar production. And you can see they peak early and then whoosh, the two curves are no longer correlated like they were over the summer. And that's because the sun's so low in the sky. You can see in these screenshots that while our production curve is really consistent, his curve gets a huge bite taken out of it in the middle of the day, right? And here's our curve again. We do have a notch in there, but it's not nearly as big as his notch. And I think the reason this happens, it's just because of the way his home is oriented and the tree coverage around it. The south side of his house has trees that block sunlight in the middle of the day now that the sun is so low in the sky. And, I would expect this effect to become exaggerated in the winter months. We're not even in winter yet, right? We're still in just the fall months. So the days are going to get way shorter. The sun's going to get way lower. But, even though it's going to matter way less overall because of those, low production months, even though we're overproducing them, we're not overproducing them at the right times. If we were overproducing them in the summer, then overall I think our system would generate more. But this is still interesting because we're going to generate more electricity than they will generate for at least 3 months, maybe even a full 6 months. So it'll be interesting to see, over a full 12-month period, how it shakes out. But it's, this comparison is a reminder of how complicated the calculus for designing a solar roof really is. It's really hard. So, and it just depends on so many different variables. But we will tally up the 12-month production for both his system and our system to get a more complete view of the strengths of each over the 12-month production cycle, the full year production cycle. And that's episode 32 of the Tesla Power Podcast. I'm your Tesla residential energy community organizer, Aaron Brady, and let's do this again on the next video.